to A Cup of Gratitude with Amanda Schaefer. Hi, I'm your host, and I'm so glad you stopped by. This podcast is really for anyone, anywhere, anytime. And it's about taking a moment to slow down and look around and actually see all of the good things that are there. There's no question that asks, is your cup half empty or half full? But I think a better question is, what's in your cup? I mean, a drop of gratitude will benefit your life unimaginably more than a full cup of anything else. So let's settle in and take a look at how we can shift our focus and embrace the joy and the wonder of the life that we have. And once you start, you won't be able to stop seeing the good. And just like me, you won't be able to stop talking about it. And somehow that creates even more. Even in the midst of difficulty, even when it's really hard, learn how to drink from a cup of gratitude.
Today we have with us Lauren Bittner. She's a licensed psychotherapist and psychology professor. Lauren specializes in anxiety and panic, trauma and addiction, and she is passionate about finding freedom through being authentic, vulnerable, and messy. She loves all things dogs, coffee, and the office. Welcome, Lauren.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
I'm excited to hear what you have to say. So I'm going to start out with a really big question. What happens in the brain when we choose gratitude?
Yeah, you're certainly right. It's a complicated, loaded question, but it's exciting to me because I love the brain and how we're wired and how we're designed. So I'll do my best to kind of have a nerdy moment, but explain to folks what's kind of happening on a kind of neurological level. So if you zoom in on your brain, you've got billions of things called neurons, and those are basically your brain cells. They look like little squiggly spaghettis, and the way that your brain communicates is there's a little space in between each brain cell where neurochemicals live. And basically they do the wave, one brain cell to the next on such a microscopic, profound level. So what happens when we practice gratitude is the more that you practice thinking about something,
right,
the more that the brain cells will begin to line up and create what's called a neural network, which is much like a road that you travel. The concept is the more you travel the road, the more automatic it becomes. If I ask listeners to think about their drive from their local grocery store home, if they've lived in that community for a decent amount of time, it takes no conscious thinking whatsoever to know the way back home.
Right.
It's the same thing when you practice gratitude. So the more you practice, the more the brain picks up on that pattern and the more natural it feels, the less resistance we feel, and the more you can actually feel like, oh, it's coming naturally because I've practiced it. It feels automatic. The more that we practice thinking with gratitude, when we get squeezed and when life happens, what comes out, hopefully, is healthier and more positive because automatically we've been practicing that gracious kind of thankful heart thinking.
Wow, that's really, really well said. I mean, honestly, I thought it was going to be way more complicated than that. It is complicated in the brain, but the way that you explained it was really easy to understand. Thanks for that.
Sure.
So what happens when we choose to focus on what's going wrong, like the bad things around us, the things that make us anxious or fearful? What happens to the brain chemistry in those instances?
Well, kind of the same concept is working here to our disadvantage. So we can practice healthy and positive things like gratitude and thankfulness, self-love, self-compassion, but we can also practice negativity. We can practice toxic thinking. And the more that we kind of travel that road, the more that we're basically meditating on the negative. And what I can say is true in my own life and in working with people is it's very easy then when we're in a negative headspace to find evidence that proves everything sucks. So we're just kind of like spiraling down very, very quickly. I don't know about you, but it seems like the days where I'm struggling to be positive, And they happen for all of us, but the days that those happen and I'm kind of just in a grumpy mood are the days, I swear to you, that some article of my clothing gets stuck on a doorknob. And I'm like, seriously, are you kidding me? It's all a big conspiracy to make my life inconvenient, and it's just a doorknob. That stuff happens all the time, but we're then putting it through this filter of it's not fair. This always happens to me. Putting
Right.
extremes that really get us stuck.
I thought it was a conspiracy. No, that makes so much sense.
There's kind of like this concept called confirmation bias. So it's thinking like, okay, if I'm thinking negatively, or if I have experienced an area of hurt, right? Maybe someone has hurt me or betrayed me. Those feelings are valid, but it's very easy for the human mind to then apply that template to all other people. And then
Right.
if someone makes a mistake and maybe did not intend to harm us, we're thinking, oh, here we go again. Here comes betrayal. I know what this is like. And then
Right.
we arm ourselves up, and it just makes us, in such a more negative and quite frankly toxic headspace. And it makes me think of, there's this kind of old proverb, and I learned it when I was doing drug and alcohol work in a group setting. It's really simple, but it's still something that helps me today, and so hopefully it will help other people. Is the proverb kind of goes something like, there's this kind of old grandpa Cherokee tribe guy, and he's taking his grandson out into the woods, and he's just kind of going on a wilderness walk with him, and he's teaching him about life. And the grandfather is teaching about his culture and his people and his tribe and all this stuff and about manhood. But he's also teaching his grandson about this concept of symbolically there being a good wolf and a bad wolf that resides inside every human.
Mm-hmm.
And the grandfather says, the bad wolf is anger and jealousy and evil and selfishness and negativity and all the things that would go along with, the bad wolf. And then he describes a good wolf that resides inside every person, and describes that the good wolf is selfless and loving and patient and kind. And the grandson says, oh, okay, well, which one wins? And the grandfather looks at him and says, the one that you feed.
Wow.
And so the concept is, with our thinking, who are we feeding? The good wolf or the bad wolf? Who are we starving out? Because whoever you feed is going to grow stronger.
Wow, that is such a great story. And absolutely, I agree. Wow, I love that. So, speaking of negative things, how has it been for your clients during the past year with COVID and the isolation it's produced with all the civil unrest and the seemingly endless political banter?
Yeah, I mean, to say that 2020 and even 2021 has been rough is the understatement of the century. I feel like it's been really, really hard. I don't think therapists have ever been more needed and in demand, which is really beautiful, but also very challenging because it means that many people are suffering. So I'd say that even for my most high functioning clients that are just kind of on a maintenance level of therapy, that they're even struggling. So that means the people that were not already kind of starting off the year doing well are really having a hard time, and everyone's just beyond exhausted at this point. Even their typical coping skills aren't really feeling like enough to kind of combat all that we're collectively facing. I think overarchingly, the thing that I hear and even experience myself is feeling exhausted, just worn out and weary. And it seems like even when I talk to my clients, certainly nationally and globally, there's a lot happening in our world, but it really has felt like there's been a disproportionate amount of weird, funky stuff in everybody's everyday life, of like things breaking, flat tires, and, family issues, and all this kind of stuff that are normal on this side of heaven. They're all a normal experience, but I've been trying to figure out for myself if it is disproportionate or if it's because we're weary that it just feels like, I don't even know if I have the resilience to handle small hurdles anymore that are typical in everyday life.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a heaviness and all these things kind of running in the background of all of our minds that we're not even aware of because we're kind of dreading getting up, it's just been so relentless.
For sure. I've always been someone, and my clients know I'm very transparent. I believe that I'm, human first. And anything I share with them is for their benefit. The time is not for me.
Right.
But I'm always honest with them that, I struggle with anxiety, but never before have I struggled with depression. And I think that this last year has certainly brought those symptoms about because you're just kind of exhausted, and even just small menial kind of tasks feel like they require so much effort, energy. And I think everybody's just longing for some kind of shift or breakthrough.
Yeah. And it's so refreshing to hear that from someone who is a therapist, that it's a person thing. It's not something's happening to you. It's happening to everyone because everyone's experiencing this together.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So how has this past year been for you just as a therapist? You started to talk about that a little bit.
Yeah. Weird, very strange, heavy. So it's been really demanding, definitely a challenging time. I also teach my students, so trying to balance my effort and energy to help my one-on-one clients as well as my students who are really going through the ringer right now. Just the academic load really not changing in what's being demanded of them, and they're struggling. So it's a strange thing because never in my career have I experienced the same things as my clients or students simultaneously alongside them. Mm-hmm. Usually as a therapist, you've had some, certainly lots of training, but most people that find themselves in this field have had some lived experience. But, the aim is that you've done your own work and you're kind of guiding someone that might have had similar experiences, but you're in a very different stage. And so it's definitely trippy and wild to be having to model for your clients like, yeah, I don't know what's going on. I feel anxious too. Anxiety is a normal response to a global pandemic, civil unrest, all these crazy things. I think that there's been quite a bit of weight on therapists, and I love the work that I do. It's really probably the highest honor of my life because I'm a professional secret keeper. People let me into the deepest place of themselves, which is phenomenal. But you're trying to hold space for people and process your own gunk at the same time. And so it's been very vital for me that I am consistent with my own therapist. One of the other things that I've done just for a sensitive community, it's been deeply enriching as I started something called the Therapy Collective, which I basically reached out to all of the private practice therapists, social workers, psychologists in my local community, and whoever has interest. Once a month we meet virtually, and we just kind of talk shop about what it's like to be a therapist right now, what we're feeling, what we need. And that's been really, really helpful because there's a particular loneliness that comes with holding space, which is, again, I love what I do, but it's just helpful to be with other people who get it without really having to explain it.
Yeah.
That's been really a big blessing to me, is to have that, community.
Yeah, what a great idea. And I'm sure it's just such a blessing to everyone in that community that you guys, like you said, you just get each other. And even if you just sit there together,
right,
it's healing. Wow, that's great. That's very impressive. So what do you do personally to find gratitude? And what do you suggest for your clients to do?
I thought a lot about this question, and I think it really comes down to service more than anything else, and I'll circle back around to that. But I think that more than anything, service is vital. And then I also remind myself of where I came from, and that is both humbling and just fills me with so much gratitude. I think about going off to college and wanting to be a teacher, and then taking a psych course, and I was like, JK, I don't want to do this with my life. And God's like, plot twist, I never wanted you to really do that. I want you to be a therapist and later on become a professor. But I think about like all of the work and effort to get to where I am, and I just feel really thankful to do the work that I do. And I feel really grateful that people let me into the most vulnerable parts of themselves. That makes me filled with so much gratitude. It takes so much courage for people, and it's amazing. But I feel like service too, because giving away to other people what I can offer with boundaries has been such a blessing to my life. That fills me with a lot of gratitude, because that's honestly what I feel like life is about. It's not all about me. It's about, community and service and connection. And so when I can feel connected and like I'm helping someone else, that makes me feel really thankful too. That helps me put things into perspective of what truly matters right now.
Yeah. And what do you suggest that your clients do? Like, how do you help them search for gratitude?
Yeah, well, I really, I don't know if I'm like the typical therapist, because I just get very real with them. I think most people find it refreshing, is that really in 2020 and 2021, I am not going to just wrap it up with a nice, pretty clinical bow and say, well, take 3 deep breaths and go get a cup of coffee because you love that, and then you won't have anything negative. That's kittens and rainbows thinking. But that's one of my taglines that I use with my clients all the time, is that's kittens and rainbows. That's
I
not
love
real.
that.
But I think more than anything is always trying to strike the balance. I do this for myself and I do this with clients, is you're trying to find the balance between validating and speaking to and acknowledging your hurt, your fear, your anger, like this sucks. It just sucks. I don't like it. I don't want this. It doesn't feel fair, whatever it is. Letting yourself feel that and process it, but trying not to stick there and land there, because staying in that place is only going to bear really toxic, gross fruit that's going to make you even more stuck in your life. So you want to validate it and then try to kind of get yourself to a place where you can acknowledge that which is going well, if that's hard to come up with, that which you are hopeful about.
Yeah. Well, that's very good advice. I heard that you have a therapy dog named Annie. Can you tell me about her?
Yeah, so Annie is thebomb.com, bringing back that 90s phrase because it's amazing. Annie is actually a retired service animal. So for folks that don't know, there are kind of different levels, so to speak, to different service animals. So service animal is the highest expectation and requirement that's nationally recognized of, if your dog has their vest on, you should be able to go into any restaurant with them, fly with them, no restrictions. Then there's kind of like a therapy service sect, like a therapy animal, and then emotional support. So an emotional support is generally just a therapist who's saying this animal helps support this person. Perhaps a therapy animal might have a little bit more of requirements and stuff, but really a service animal is very well trained. They are a working animal, a working dog. And so Annie is retired from service, but she was actually my husband's service animal. So my husband served in Afghanistan and came back with post-traumatic stress disorder and a traumatic brain injury, and phenomenal man who really did a lot of work to get to the place that he's at right now, which is just deeply inspiring. But anyhow, even after multiple rounds of therapy and things like that, the primary person that really helped him suggested this program called Puppies Behind Bars, which is where Annie came from. And to my knowledge, originally my husband was a little bit resistant because it's scary to kind of love something again. But Annie came from a program called Puppies Behind Bars that's located out in New York. And basically what they do is they pair, it's looking different because of COVID now, but before COVID, they pair qualifying inmates with a dog. And so they work with breeders. Annie is a Oxford Black Lab, and they pair them with inmates, and they teach them over 2 years. They teach the inmates how to train these dogs.
Wow.
And so live with them in the cell, incarcerate. So Annie's a prison dog, which is awesome. For all my Office fans, Prison Mike. Annie has her purple bandana. But so she, in order to be a service dog, you have to pass like a big test. And so Annie did that and came to be with my husband, and then retired out when he didn't need her in that capacity anymore. But she learned about 90 to 100 commands. She knows even how to salute. She's a total love bug and a really big blessing to the clients that I see, because she gets to come to work with me, and it's just, total wiggle butt, but also just profoundly insightful, and really helps, I think, soften the discomfort that sometimes comes with being in my office or talking about things that are traumatic. She really wants to bridge that gap. So she's just awesome.
Wow, that's amazing. And what an amazing story of how she came to be with you and how she was trained. I mean, there's gratitude written all over every part of that. That's amazing.
Well, it's a beautiful concept too, because the inmates that qualify, people are capable of change. I wouldn't have devoted my life and career to this field if I didn't believe that.
Right.
And so maybe they made a really bad choice, a really awful choice. But a lot of these people that qualify for the program, they end up wanting to give back and trying to have a life that is of service in an effort to kind of pay recompense for maybe the decision that they made that was really negative.
Wow.
And I think that's deeply inspiring. That's amazing.
It is. It really is. Wow.
Yeah.
Very glad that I asked that question. So what would you say is the best first step for our listeners to learn how to practice gratefulness?
Yeah, so I'd say start very small. You want to be consistent more than anything else. So you want to just be realistic and intentional about whatever area you're going to decide to try to practice some gratitude in. Because if we kind of remember going back to that well-traveled road, the more it's traveled, the more likely it's going to set in and become kind of this deeply traveled thing in your mind. And you are more likely to establish that by being small and consistent rather than, okay, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do this, and I'm also going to do this thing. That's how people burn themselves out. It's not realistic. So choosing really no more than 2 areas where you want to be intentionally thankful. So certainly people have heard of like gratitude journals. You can do those by writing down like 3 things that you're grateful for. I also like to switch it up a bit, and I'll do maybe 3 things that inspire me or 3 people that inspire me, and then drill down into what is it about them or their experience or what they offer, or what is it about that thing that makes me feel inspired, because that brings in some hope. And right now, gratitude, I think, needs the boost of hope to happen because people are tired. And we can also do things like ABCs of gratitude, like literally go through the ABCs. If you're really grumping around, which is totally okay, but I'm gonna make that a verb, just grumping. If you're just grumping around, I really implore you, start with the beginning of the alphabet. You don't have to commit to the end, but try to make it through. And like, A, what am I thankful for? I'm really grateful for Annie. Like, work your way through and see what comes up. I'm telling you, the more you practice, the less difficult it will be to come up with stuff.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I mean, it just keeps growing.
For sure. It really does. And again, you want to feel and be honest about, like, I'm totally in a grumpy mood right now. You don't have to like, oh, okay, pretend now I'm just super duper happy. No, we have to do some work to get to the place where gratitude can come in, but just start really small and be consistent. I use analogies all the time in session, and I try to help people envision, a really big boat. It doesn't matter the size or the style, but a really big boat is powered more than anything by that little shifting, the little rudder is just forcing all of the water to go through. All you have to do is change the wheel in 2 degrees of a direction, and the boat will go in a completely different trajectory.
Yeah.
You don't have to make a big sudden change. The rudder just has to be moved a little bit.
Yeah. That's a great analogy. I can picture it. That's awesome. So, if it's okay for me to ask you, what is a situation in your personal life right now where it's difficult to stay positive?
Well, I think more than probably identifying one specific situation, it's more challenging for me when I am feeling exhausted and burned out. That's when agitation comes.
Yeah.
And I think more than anything, in this last 11 months or so, I know that when agitation shows up, it's an indicator that my anxiety is overwhelmed, it's exhausted, it's kind of beyond the point. And so it's really hard for me when I'm agitated to kind of, first of all, who wants to be around you when you're agitated, right? That's not fun.
Exactly.
Thank you to my husband. But shout out to you. But we all have those grumpy moments. But I know that if I'm agitated, I have to use that as a message of, okay, I know this is going to sound very therapist-y, but I need to nurture the little kid inside of me that clearly is overwhelmed and needs some self-soothing before I can get to a positive place. That I have to kind of tend to that first, and then the natural outpouring of that is I'll be able to get back to a place of, gratitude or positivity. But I kind of have to recognize in my 30s that the agitation is the little kid in me of like, whoa, 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 you're going way too fast. Slow down, slow down. I'm overwhelmed. I feel scared, and I have to tend to that first. So I think the agitation is the primary thing for me right now that can be an obstacle to being positive.
I love that. It's not too therapist-y, if that's a word. I love the thought of nurturing the little child inside of me because that's where our emotions kind of get like the little child,
Sure.
Yeah, absolutely. That's really nice thought. I like that.
I keep on my nightstand a little picture of me, and usually when I think about my inner child, she's about 7, but I'm younger in the photo, but I'm running and I look really, really happy. And I keep that picture on my nightstand, not because I'm vain, I'm like framed pictures of myself, but because it's actually really helpful as a tangible reminder that little kid needs love and compassion, not judgment. Because what happens when we get older is we're far, far less patient with ourselves, and we'll be really kind of unkind and abusive with the way that we talk to ourselves. So it's helpful for me to kind of have that tangible reminder of like, okay, I'm agitated. How would I help a little kid when they're overwhelmed? Not stop being agitated, knock it off. That's not going to do anything except make me more angry.
Right. Well, that's a powerful, powerful thought. And I think it's great that you do that. And I might go find a picture of myself when I was little and put it up. And what a great thing. So, as a Christian and a therapist, do you see places in God's Word where He tries to help us focus on the things that are good and not get weighed down by the difficult?
For sure. I mean, I think that there's lots of places in God's Word where God shares with us the value of tending to our mind. And one of the things that I really love and will never be able to fully comprehend is, Jesus was fully God, fully man, but he understands living on this side of heaven, and he understands just how active and overwhelming it can be for us in our thinking and in our emotions and all that kind of stuff. But there's a few scriptures that I think of, and I certainly use in session for folks that identify, as believers. I certainly can't offer that up if someone doesn't want to kind of go the Christian route. But certainly the concept of renewing your mind found in Romans, and the concept of capturing thoughts and trying to kind of send them to Jesus that we find in 2 Corinthians, kind of arresting the thought and giving it to him.
Yeah.
But the one that is my absolute favorite is found in Song of Solomon. And I actually had a really talented client doodle a little picture of this that I have hanging in my office. And it talks about tending to the little foxes that can show up in the garden and spoil the vine. And I think about our mind like a garden. And if we're not tending to it, certainly little foxes will come, weeds will come, choke things out, steal, bring, dismay to our garden. So when I think about my mind, I'm always thinking about uprooting lies and things that are negative, because it's going to choke out the positive that's trying to sprout. It's going to try to choke out the gratitude that I'm trying to, water. It's the same concept of what are you feeding, what are you starving, in the Good Wolf kind of proverb.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. If you could give your younger self any advice, what would that be?
I think that more than anything, I would want to tell myself that my feelings and what I needed at the time was valid, that it wasn't too much. And just to slow down and tend to myself, to really know that it's okay to show up as my authentic self and take care of me first. I think for a long time in life, just because of life circumstances and, things that I experienced, I was much more apt to tend to and over nurture the people around me and not give any of that to myself. It makes me think of, if you've ever flown on a plane, they say, in their little spiel in the beginning, God forbid we hit turbulence or there's an emergency, you're going to get oxygen masks that come down from the ceiling. They always tell you, put yours on first before you situate everyone around you. And when I look back at my younger self, she's like gasping, holding breath, trying to get everybody else's oxygen mask situated. And I would just want to tell them, put yours on first. Slow down. You're no good to anybody if you can't breathe.
Yeah, that's powerful. That's great. Do you have a dream that you haven't realized yet that kind of helps you keep hope and stay positive?
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's a couple things professionally that I want to do that certainly have a crossover into community. Anything that gives me hope is always connected to other people. Even though I'm super introverted, God's kingdom is all about people, and he sets us in families and in tribes to do life together. So it's all about that, I feel like. And I'm really humbled when, the King of Kings is literally partnering with you to love on people and to help his children. It's like, whoa, that's amazing.
Yeah.
But I think some specific dreams are, I would like to do a podcast of my own eventually. I started a book at the beginning of quarantine that needs some tending to and some TLC, but I'd really like to see that completed. I'm really passionate about trying to make things that are kind of emotional and psychological approachable for the average person, to help them understand how they're wired, why they do what they do, and to also be able to do something about it.
That's awesome. I would read that book and listen to that podcast. That's awesome.
Thanks.
So, what's one thing that you would really like to say to the listeners while you have their attention?
It's really important that I communicate to the listeners that the presence of uncomfortable or challenging issues, frustrating or really sad, overwhelming emotions is not evidence of you failing. It is not evidence of you having a lack in the Father and faith in God. That's not what's happening. The reality of life on this side of heaven, and that you're not doing anything wrong. You're not being punished by God, but it is not his heart for us that we go through pain and suffering. But I can guarantee you that Jesus is in the mess, and he is trustworthy to be given that stuff, and he will help us through. And the nature of God is that he's a redeemer and a restorer. So you're not doing anything wrong. You're not failing, child. He's wildly proud of you.
Wow, what a great thing to say, and it's true. We recognize that it's true for other people, but we need
Right.
to hear that that's true for ourselves.
Exactly. Yeah.
So I just want to thank you so much for joining us today. And as a podcast host, I've really enjoyed this conversation. But for those of you who don't know, as a parent, I'm really, really proud because Lauren is my daughter. It's been so great to hear your insight and your experience. And I do know that hope and gratitude is just ingrained in you and everything that you do.
It really means a lot. I'm awfully proud of you and getting this podcast going, and it's really special to be able to, connect and share and kind of have a conversation. And I feel really thankful and grateful that I've always had a really fierce mama who did anything that she could to help me make my way in the world. So I love you.
I love you too. And thank you just so much for spending time with us.
You've got it. Thanks for the invitation.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye.
Hey, so I just want to thank you so much for spending your time with me. And I want to challenge you to go out today and to just take notice and to stop and really look around and find at least one good thing, one thing to be thankful for. If you do that today, you're going to find so many more things tomorrow without even trying. Because once you start, you begin to see what's always been there. And if you need a refill, you can come join me again for another cup. Make sure to subscribe and have an awesome day and go be grateful.